Hey everyone, and welcome back for another deep dive with us. Today we're going to be exploring a topic that I think is pretty universal, healing from hurt. And we're going to be looking at this through two really powerful lenses, the wisdom of the Bible and the insights of psychology. And to guide us on this journey, we're using some really cool material from Unchained Disciples. There's a series of videos and some of their website content. And have you ever felt like sometimes your reaction to something is like way bigger than the situation called for? Or maybe you've seen someone hold on to anger for years over something. Well, we're going to unpack all of that and more in this deep dive. So let's get started.
Yeah. It is amazing how often the biblical perspective and the psychological perspective really reinforce one another. They offer a really comprehensive understanding of hurt and how to move beyond it.
Yeah, absolutely. And the Unchained Disciples, they talk about three main ways that we react when we've been hurt. One is, we feel that emotional pain, or sometimes we strike back with anger, or we just pretend like everything's fine.
Right.
But they point out that sometimes pretending to be okay can actually be the most damaging in the long run.
Right. And, in the videos, they use this phrase, becoming a little bit more broken, each time we push hurt down instead of acknowledging it. And, that buried hurt can actually lead to some pretty extreme reactions down the road.
Yeah. And, they give this example of this guy who's usually super helpful and friendly. But then the minute he gets behind the wheel of a car, any little traffic snafu triggers like full-blown road rage.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's a classic example of what psychologists call intermittent explosive disorder. It's where seemingly small triggers set off a totally disproportionate response. And often, what's fueling that is past hurt that hasn't been addressed.
Yeah. So that old saying about not letting the sun go down on your anger.
Yeah.
Turns out there's some pretty serious psychology backing that up. And it's not just about how intensely we react, but also how long we hold on to that anger. Like, the Unchained Disciples, they talk about people still fuming.
Yeah.
Weeks or even years after someone cut them off in the grocery store line.
Right. Yeah. The word that comes to mind there is resentment.
Yeah.
It's like holding on to that anger and letting it fester. And, the danger there is that over time, resentment can actually become a core part of your personality.
Yep.
Bitterness becomes a habit, then it becomes a trait. And eventually, that's just who you are.
Yeah, it really does kind of bake in, doesn't it? And that reminds me of Ephesians 4.2627, which says, "Be angry and do not sin. Do not let the sun go down on your wrath, nor give place to the devil."
Mm-hmm.
And you know what I think is interesting about that verse is that it's not saying we can't feel anger. It's a natural human emotion. But it's about not letting that anger control us and lead us into sin.
Right. And that's where forgiveness comes in. And not just for the person who hurt you, but for yourself as well. The Unchained Disciples emphasize that forgiveness is about taking back your power. It's about acknowledging the hurt without letting it define you.
Yeah, it's so powerful. One of the videos uses this crazy example to illustrate these disproportionate reactions. So somebody goes to Starbucks, and the barista gets their name and their order wrong. It's a minor inconvenience at worst, right? But this person completely loses it, cursing at the barista, grabbing them, even throwing coffee.
Oh, my goodness. Well, it sounds almost comical, but it really highlights how unhealed hurt can manifest in these extreme ways. The situation itself isn't the real problem. It's just a trigger for all of that buried pain.
All right, it's like the tip of the iceberg, So we're really starting to see how all this unaddressed hurt can affect our reactions. But the Unchained Disciples, they take it even deeper. They have this video called "Changing the Story You Tell Yourself." And it's all about how the state of your life is directly influenced by the stories you tell yourself and what you believe is possible.
It's such a powerful concept. We all have this inner critic, this voice in our heads that whispers doubts and fears. And, often those negative self-beliefs are rooted in experiences from our past.
Wait, are you saying that the way I talk to myself, like the things I believe about myself, can actually shape my reality?
Well, it's not magic, but it's close. Think of it this way. Your past shapes your thoughts shape your actions, and your actions shape your present. It's a cycle. And if you're constantly telling yourself these negative stories like "I'm not good enough" or "I always fail," you're more likely to act in ways that confirm those beliefs.
So what kind of stories are we talking about here?
Well, the Unchained Disciples, they break it down into a few common ones. The dependence story, the unworthy story, the disconnection story, the mistrust story, the failure story, and the abandonment story. And each one represents a different set of beliefs and fears that can hold us back from experiencing true freedom and joy.
Wow, just the names of those stories kind of give me chills. Can we unpack a couple of those? Like, what is the dependent story all about?
Sure. So the dependent story is rooted in this idea that you need someone else to be complete, to feel worthy or secure. And, it can stem from early childhood experiences where your needs weren't consistently met. And that can lead to this deep-seated fear of being alone or abandoned.
And so how does the Bible address that kind of thinking?
Well, for the dependent story, the Unchained disciples bring in Psalm 118.8, which says, "It is better to take refuge in the Lord than to trust in man." It's a reminder that our ultimate security and worth come from God, not from other people.
Okay, that's such a great example of how the biblical and psychological perspectives complement each other. Like, it's not about denying the psychological roots of these stories, but rather finding strength and healing through faith as well.
Exactly. And, it's not just about intellectual understanding, it's about integrating these truths into our hearts and minds so that we can begin to live them out.
Okay, this is all super interesting, but I have to ask, what about the unworthy story? I feel like that one really resonates with me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, the unworthy story often stems from experiences of criticism or rejection, leading to this deep-seated belief that you're not good enough, not lovable, or deserving of happiness. And it can manifest as, constant self-doubt, people-pleasing, and a fear of failure.
Wow, I'm sure that hits close to home for a lot of people.
Mhm.
So what's the biblical antidote to this feeling of unworthiness?
Well, the Unchained disciples highlight verses like Ephesians 2.10, which reminds us that we are God's masterpiece, created in Christ Jesus to do good works. And Psalm 139.16 beautifully proclaims, "I praise you because I am fearfully and wonderfully made. Your works are wonderful. I know that full well." It's a powerful affirmation of our inherent worth and value in God's eyes.
It really is.
Hmm.
Okay, so we've just scratched the surface of a couple of these stories, but I think you can already see how these narratives can really shape the way we see ourselves and the world around us, and how understanding them through both the biblical and psychological lens can offer us some really powerful tools for healing and growth. So stick with us for part 2 of this deep dive as we continue to explore these stories and the practical steps we can take to break free from their grip and to start living a life of greater freedom, joy, and wholeness.
Yeah, and we're going to dig into that healing self-assessment that the Unchained disciples provide to help you really pinpoint those areas where you might be stuck. And it really is eye-opening, so join us for part 2.
All right, see you there.
It's amazing how these stories, they can be so subtle, but they have this huge impact on how we see ourselves and the world around us.
It really is true. It's like we're walking around with these, invisible scripts that are dictating our lives. But thankfully, the Unchained disciples don't just leave us hanging with these, heavy concepts. They actually provide a really helpful tool for identifying those hidden hurts and negative patterns. It's called a healing self-assessment.
It's a deep dive in itself. It prompts us to consider everything from potential addictions and fears to unhealthy coping mechanisms, and even, those pesky triggers that set us off.
Okay, I am ready to get real here. So what's the first step in this self-assessment?
Well, it all starts with what they call willful blindness. Think of it like that check engine light in your car, the one you keep ignoring, hoping it'll just go away on its own.
Oh, I have totally been. Sometimes it feels easier to pretend a problem doesn't exist than to actually face it.
Exactly. And those ignored issues, they can be anything from lingering sadness or that nagging feeling of not being good enough to actual health concerns or friendships that, leave us feeling drained. It's about those things that we're sweeping under the rug instead of confronting head on.
Okay, so step 1 is shining a light on those areas where we might be in denial. What comes next?
Next up, addictions. And I'm not just talking about, drugs or alcohol. It could be anything that we're excessively relying on to cope with life's challenges, whether it's social media, food work, or even negativity.
Wait, negativity means some people actually get addicted to being negative?
It might sound strange, but it's more common than you think. Negativity can become this weird sort of comfort zone, a way of shielding ourselves from disappointment or vulnerability. It's like we're always expecting the worst, so we're never caught off guard.
Wow, I never thought of it that way. Okay, so we've tackled blindness and addictions. What other uncomfortable truths does this self-assessment urge us to confront?
Fears. What are those deep-seated anxieties that are keeping us playing small, holding us back from, pursuing our dreams and living our fullest lives? Could it be the fear of failure, the fear of being alone, the fear of not being loved, or even just the fear of getting old?
Fear is such a powerful emotion. It can be absolutely paralyzing if we let it take over. So how do we even begin to tackle something that's so deeply rooted?
Well, the key is to bring those fears into the light, to really examine them and challenge their validity. Often our feels are based on past experiences or limiting beliefs that no longer serve us, especially if those experiences were painful or traumatic.
Okay, so I'm seeing a pattern here.
Mm.
This self-assessment is all about digging deep and getting honest with ourselves, even if it's uncomfortable.
Precisely, and it doesn't stop there. The assessment also prompts us to take a look at our physical health. What have we already healed from? What are we actively doing to take care of our bodies? And are there any areas we might be neglecting?
So it's not just about our emotional and mental well-being, but also our physical health.
Right. Healing is a holistic process. The mind, body, and spirit are all interconnected. And this self-assessment, it pushes us to acknowledge those areas where we might be unconsciously sabotaging our overall well-being.
Okay, I'm taking notes. What else is on this healing journey checklist?
Next, we examine distractions. What are those things that are constantly pulling our attention away from what truly matters? Those energy vampires that keep us from being present and engaged in our lives?
Ooh, I think we all know the answer to that one. Social media, anyone.
It's a common culprit for sure. But distractions can take many forms. It could be an unhealthy relationship, a demanding job that leaves us feeling depleted, or even our own racing thoughts that keep us up at night. Anything that prevents us from connecting with our inner peace and focusing on what truly nourishes our souls.
So it's about identifying those energy zappers and reclaiming our focus, right?
Exactly, and that leads us to a really thought-provoking question. What are we learning and what's influencing us? Are we filling our minds with negativity and fear through, the media we consume or the people we surround ourselves with? Or are we actively seeking out sources of inspiration, wisdom, and positivity?
That's a big one. It makes you think about the books, you read the podcasts, you listen to the conversations you engage in, even the thoughts you allow to take root in your mind.
It's all connected,
Yeah.
the information we absorb, the relationships we cultivate, all of that shapes our internal world and ultimately influences our reality. And we have more control over that than we think.
This self-assessment is truly eye-opening. It makes you realize how much agency we actually have in shaping our own healing journey.
Absolutely. And the Unchained disciples, they don't shy away from the tough stuff.
Hmm.
One of the most crucial aspects of this self-assessment is identifying toxic relationships. Are there people in our lives who consistently drain our energy, bring us down, or discourage our growth?
That's a tough one to face, especially if those toxic relationships are with people you know that we feel obligated to keep in our lives, like family members.
It's true, family dynamics can be incredibly complex. But even within those challenging relationships, we have the power to set boundaries, to protect our energy, and prioritize our own well-being.
So even when it comes to family, we still have a choice. We can choose to stay stuck in patterns of hurt or to break free and seek healthier ways of relating.
Exactly. And the final piece of this self-assessment puzzle might be the most revealing of all. Our triggers. What are those specific words, actions, or situations that evoke, an irrational or disproportionate response from us?
Triggers, don't we all have those? For me, it's when someone interrupts me when I'm speaking. I know it's probably not a big deal rationally, but I instantly feel disrespected and dismissed.
That's a perfect example. And it's not about suppressing those reactions, but rather understanding the why behind them. What is it about being interrupted that triggers such a strong emotional response in you? Is it about feeling unheard or unseen? Does it tap into a deeper fear of not being valued or
Yeah.
respected?
Oh, I never thought about it like that. So recognizing those triggers is crucial because it allows us to understand, the underlying hurt or insecurity that's driving our reaction.
Exactly. And once we've identified those triggers, we can start to develop healthier coping mechanisms, to respond thoughtfully rather than react impulsively.
Okay, I have to admit, this self-assessment is pretty intense. It's making me realize there's a lot more going on beneath the surface than I realized.
That's the thing about healing. It's not always easy or comfortable. It requires us to be honest with ourselves, to confront those parts of us
Right.
we'd rather keep hidden.
Yeah, it's true. And, the Unchained disciples, they don't just leave us hanging with all these uncomfortable truths. They actually provide a ton of practical steps we can take to move forward on this healing journey, drawing upon, both psychological and biblical wisdom.
Right. It's a powerful combination. They talk about, the importance of keeping the promises we make to ourselves, acknowledging our feelings, practicing forgiveness, and even making changes to our environment if necessary.
And they really emphasize the power of challenging those stories we tell ourselves. Those negative narratives that keep us stuck in cycles of hurt and self-doubt.
Right. It's about recognizing that we have a choice. We can continue to believe those old limiting stories, or we can choose to write new, empowering ones that reflect our true worth and potential.
Yeah, and one thing that really struck me in the videos is this idea that the state of your life is a direct result of the stories you tell yourself. It's like our thoughts and beliefs actually have the power to shape our reality.
That's a profound truth. And it's supported by both psychology and scripture. Psychologically, we know that our thoughts influence our feelings, which then drive our behaviors and actions. And biblically, Proverbs 23:7 tells us, as a man thinks in his heart, so is he.
Oh, wow, that's powerful. So if we're constantly telling ourselves these negative stories, like I'm not good enough or I'll always fail, we're essentially setting ourselves up for those outcomes.
Exactly. It becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. But the good news is we have the power to rewrite those stories. We can choose to focus on more empowering beliefs that support our growth and well-being.
So how do you do that?
Well, the Unchained disciples offer some really practical strategies, like becoming more aware of our negative self-talk and consciously replacing it with positive affirmations.
Okay, so catching ourselves when we're being negative and then flipping the script.
Exactly. And they also highlight the importance of gratitude. When we focus on what we're grateful for, it shifts our perspective away from lack and scarcity and towards abundance and possibility.
Gratitude is such a simple practice,
Yeah.
yet it can be so powerful. It's like an instant mood booster.
It is. And it's not just about feeling better, it's about rewiring our brains for positivity. Studies have shown that practicing gratitude actually strengthens those neural pathways that are associated with happiness and well-being.
That's so cool. Okay, so we're becoming aware of our negative self-talk. We're cultivating gratitude. What else can we do to rewrite those limiting stories?
Well, the Unchained disciples also encourage us to focus on our strengths. We often get so caught up in our perceived flaws and weaknesses that we forget to acknowledge our talents and abilities.
It's like we're wearing those, failure story glasses that filter out all the good stuff.
Exactly. So taking some time to identify and really appreciate our strengths can help us build confidence and resilience. It's about recognizing our inherent worth and potential.
Okay, I like that. And then what about visualization?
Right? They even suggest doing a visualization exercise where we create this vivid mental picture of the future we want to create.
Because visualization is such a powerful tool for manifesting our desires. When we can clearly see those goals and dreams, it energizes us and motivates us to take action.
Exactly. And they connect that to Habakkuk 2.2, which says, write the vision and make it plain on tablets that he may run who reads it. It's like a divine blueprint for creating our best lives.
I love that. Okay, so we're working on rewriting our stories.
Right.
But what about the hurt that's already been inflicted? How do we deal with, that pain and resentment that might be lingering from the past?
Forgiveness is key. And it's not about condoning the actions of the person who hurt us. It's about releasing ourselves from the grip of anger and bitterness.
Yeah, the Unchained disciples, they make it clear that forgiveness is a gift we give ourselves. It's about choosing to let go of the pain so we can reclaim our own power and move forward.
And that can be a challenging process, especially when the hurt is deep. But they offer some helpful tips, like acknowledging the pain without dwelling on it, focusing on the lessons learned, and even practicing empathy for the person who hurt us.
Empathy for someone who hurt me, that seems almost impossible.
It might feel counterintuitive, but sometimes understanding the other person's perspective can help us release some of the resentment we're holding on to. It doesn't excuse their actions, but it can open the door to compassion and understanding.
That's a really powerful shift in perspective. And they also talk about the importance of making changes to our environment if necessary. Sometimes healing requires us to create some distance from toxic people or situations that are keeping us stuck in cycles of hurt.
Right. That's a powerful act of self-care and self-preservation. It's about prioritizing our own well-being and establishing healthy boundaries.
And they connect that to Proverbs 13:20, which says, he who walks with wise men will be wise, but the companion of fools will be destroyed. It's a reminder that the people we surround ourselves with have a profound impact on our lives.
It's all interconnected, our thoughts, our beliefs, our relationships, our environment. Healing is a holistic journey, a continual process of growth and transformation that encompasses every aspect of our being.
Wow, this deep dive into healing from hurt has been such an incredible journey. We've explored so many powerful insights and practical strategies. What a gift. Before we wrap up, I'd love to hear your final thoughts on this topic. What's the most important message you hope listeners take away from this deep dive?
For me, it all comes down to the power of choice. We can choose to remain victims of our past hurts, or we can choose to become architects of our own healing. It's a journey that requires courage, vulnerability, and a commitment to showing up for ourselves. But the rewards are immeasurable: greater peace, joy, freedom, and wholeness.
That is beautifully said. I love that. And I think the Unchained Disciples offer a perfect reminder for all of us who are ready to embark on this healing adventure. You are not alone. God is with you every step of the way, and within you lies the power to heal and become the best version of yourself. Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive into healing from hurt. Until next time, keep seeking, keep growing, and keep shining your light.
May you find peace and healing on your journey.